You know her from Full House, Fuller House, and a slew of Christmas movies and so many other projects. Her name, Candace Cameron Bure. She's actually a friend of mine, and we recently had a chance to sit down and talk about her life, her career, and most importantly, her faith, how she came to become a Christian and what that means to her. It was a wide-ranging conversation. It was part of Higher Ground's monthly events, and it was a lot of fun. And I wanted to present that audio to you today here on the Higher Ground podcast because Candace is phenomenal, and she's an example of somebody who has been in Hollywood since she was a child and has really been not only untouched by the negatives of Hollywood, but she's been a real inspiration to people across the country, across the world, not just in her role as DJ Tanner, but through books, through her social media, and just always trying to be a constant source of uplifting, comments and faith. And so with no further ado, here is my wide, sweeping conversation with Candace Cameron Bure. Candace, welcome to Washington Times Higher Ground. Lots to talk about today. I want to start with your life and career. And let's start with career because you've been around for a long time now in people's homes through TV and movies since you were a kid.
I know I have.
You have been. And you started so young, though. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people would love to know, what was sort of your entryway into the industry?
Yeah. Billy, thanks for having me on. It's always so great to chat with you. As far as my entry into Hollywood, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. And so a friend of my mom's had her son in the business, and she was like, "You have cute kids. Let me give their picture to my agent." And that's really how the whole thing started. My parents were not in show business. My dad was a public school teacher for over 35 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom raising the four of us. And then entertainment just kind of happened because we lived in Los Angeles. So I have two other sisters and a brother, and my brother and I kind of took off in entertainment, and we started with commercials. And before you know it, I mean, that was at 5 years old. And by the time I was 10, I was cast as DJ Tanner on Full House.
I mean, it must have been shocking though, because it's one thing for a friend to be like, hey, submit their pictures, they're really cute kids, to then having two. I mean, it's almost like a statistical anomaly, two of your kids ending up on two totally different projects that were huge cultural projects.
Yes.
What was that like for your family dynamic? That must have been so interesting.
It absolutely was. And I was a kid, so it'd be a great question to ask my mom and dad now today reflecting back, but it was such a different world. They didn't know anything about Hollywood, so they were really learning as we went along, and my parents were very, very protective in the best of ways. I think that's why my brother and I are as grounded as we are and didn't go through a lot of those types of problems and addictions that you find a lot of child actors have gone through, because my parents were trying to navigate it from the perspective of like, we still want our kids to be normal children and survive this industry, because they knew there were some bad things in it, but there were also some great things. So they were by our side through it all. But it was definitely challenging for them to navigate having my two other siblings who weren't in the business to feel like a balanced home. And I
Yeah.
think they did a really great job at that.
No, I mean, it's clear in who you guys are. I've gotten to know you guys very well over the years,
Mhm.
and the people you are, very normal people. That's, as you were saying, it's a rare thing, coming out of Hollywood, growing up as a kid in Hollywood, facing all that pressure. And again, the fact that there were two different shows, I mean, two different schedules going on
Mhm.
in your family that you were keeping, along with just the normal craziness of just being a family. And you know how crazy that is and all the
Yeah.
things that go on with that. When you sort of look back at that trajectory coming into Hollywood, and we'll get into some of the details of sort of leaving to raise your family, coming back, and you have a crazy career again now. What has been the most beautiful part of that journey overall for you working in the industry?
Honestly, it's been the journey itself. Truly. I look at it, and I had such a successful childhood in terms of a career, which is just one in a million. And I'm so grateful for all of those opportunities and the friendships that I've made along the way and the family that I made along the way. But but the journey for me, having gotten married, I've been married for 27 years. I have 3 beautiful adult children, and having the time that I took to spend at home with them, and then ultimately come back into the industry and have an even more successful career than when I was a child, like that journey in itself is the blessing. Grateful for every step along the way, and I truly love what I do. I love all the different assets or aspects of my life and the different components in terms of business, because I do a whole lot more than just acting. And that has surprised me. You know, these are things that I've prayed for a long time, that I've worked really hard towards achieving. And I'm here at 47 years old and I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm
It's
doing it.
amazing. It's
So
amazing.
it's
I
like,
mean, you brought up
yeah,
prayer, and the person you are, you're a person of faith. It's just who you
yeah,
are, right? And
yeah,
I want to get into the journey to faith, but before I do, just a general question, because when you have stardom like that, you're a kid, things are just going really well, then you get married, you start a family, you made a choice to spend time with your family and sort of move away for a time, from
yeah.
the industry. What was that decision like? Was it hard? And was any part of you thinking, I'm going to come back at some point?
So it was a difficult decision. I was 22 when I had our first child, when I had Natasha. And I just thought, I am going to be working full time and I'm going to be a mom and I'm going to do it all at the same time. And I very quickly realized that I couldn't do my job as a mom the way that I wanted to do it if I were working full time and trying to travel. And so I laid that down and I said, Lord, I'm going to be home with my kids and I have a desire to work. I love it. I love my job and it fulfills me in a very different kind of creative way, but I know right now I'm supposed to be home for my children. And it was a difficult transition for the first few years, definitely. And even though I made the decision, I wanted to stay at home. Quite frankly, I'd been working since I was 5 years old. I didn't really know how to be home. And I think my mom instincts totally kicked in and they were pretty good, but it was a different adjustment because I didn't have any directors telling me what a great job I did that day. My kids were just like, more snacks, more food, change my diaper, make my bed, do my homework for me, all the things I joke. And so you're in daily life and that was kind of like a big eye opener to transition in like the humble work of parenting.
Yeah,
And
and it's
that's
hard
truly what
work.
it is. It's very hard work. And yet it's the most rewarding work as well. Now having adult children, it's incredibly rewarding. And so it was a hard transition. It was. But probably by the time I had my third child, Max, and we were in it a couple years, it was just like, okay, I found my rhythm. I knew that was my season of life. And I'll tell you, I truly flourished. I flourished in it, in the relationship with my children, in my relationship with my husband, and in my relationship, most of all, with God.
Yeah, and that trust of, hey, I'm just going to hand it over to God. This is where he wants me right now. At what point did you feel, okay, it's time for me now. God's calling me back to this first love that you had of acting.
Mhm.
What was that process like for you?
Well, it was kinda easy in the sense of the decision making because my husband played professional hockey for 12 years, and that was the biggest reason why I decided to be at home full time because he was out traveling. So, when his career ended and he retired, that was then like, "Hey, what do we wanna do?" Now he had the availability to be home, and so I was like, "I would love to try going back to work at this point," and we talked about that, and he was very supportive and said, "Go for it." So, that's when I picked up the phone, and I honestly had no expectation because I'd been out of the business for 10 years, so I thought, "This could go either way." this could the door could open and someone could say, "Oh, sure, we love Full House. We'd love to see you. Come on in for an audition." Or it could have been, "Hey, that was a long time ago. We've totally moved on. We don't know where you've been, but we haven't seen you for 10 years and we really don't care anymore."
And that wasn't the
And
case, so they cared. They
that
cared.
wasn't the case. Yeah, they did care. So that door opened and I was very grateful. But I will tell you that I had peace no matter which way it went. And that is hand to God the truth. He knows my heart. And I was like, God, if you open this door, I would love it. But if you don't, I have surrendered to whatever time and place and season of life you have me in. And whatever that
Yeah.
looks like, I'm yours.
And that's a great lesson because that is a really hard place. And there may be people who are watching or listening to this who are hearing that and they want to get there, but they're not there, right? They want to be that person who's like, okay, God, where do you want me? Who do you want me to talk to today? What do you want me to do?
Hmm.
What for you, and then we'll get into your spiritual journey itself, but what helped you get to that place where you were able to finally sort of surrender it all to him?
Well, the great thing was that when I decided to take that time and be home with my kids as the priority, it also allowed me time, especially when they were in school. That's when I really was thriving in my relationship with Jesus because I was reading my Bible every day. I was studying my Bible. I was going to Bible study groups with other women. I led one at my house for 10 years. A group of women would come home, and it was my time in the word and studying God's word that gave me a peace that surpasses all understanding. That's what the Bible tells us. And it truly did. And I absolutely trusted him. The more and more that I read his word and dug into the Bible, I understood who he was and I understood my relationship before him and his love for me. And that ultimately he has the best in mind for me, and he's going to open and close doors. However, I can choose to walk through whichever ones I want to because I have free will, but I
Yeah,
can listen
yeah.
for his guidance, and that's what I've tried my best all my life to do.
Yeah, it's a journey, and there are a lot of people who they amass a lot of money and fame and fortune, and they're walking through doors that they've chosen, right? And that can get
Mhm.
confusing. You sort of watch it, and you're like, wait, but God has a different plan for each one of us, right? And so
Yeah.
being able to surrender to that is so important. It's one of the most important things, and it makes me think about your journey. Your family growing up, they obviously kept you guys, on the straight and narrow. They raised you really well. But faith was not necessarily part of that equation from the very beginning. At what point did faith sort of come into your family? And then we can kind of talk about how you really came into faith personally.
Sure. So I came to faith with my family at 12 years old. So my mom has always been a believer. My dad was not a believer, so we didn't really talk about religion or God in our home. But everything changed when my parents were going through a really hard time in their marriage, almost got a divorce, and a friend of the family invited them to some counseling at their church and then to start attending church. And at that time, I was 12 years old, and that's what started our journey as a family together of faith. However, my brother, my two sisters, my dad, and we all found our faith at different times and ages. So I became a Christian at 12 years old. I know I was saved. My salvation, was for the Lord at 12 years old. And I really came to faith, started walking with the Lord, which was the difference for me. I believe I was always saved, but my relationship started with God when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah. Yeah. And, what was it for you? Because it's sort of that head and heart knowledge, right? It's like we
Mhm.
have it in our heads. When you grow up with faith like that, at least for me, it was in my head. I knew it, I understood it, but it didn't really hit my heart, honestly, till my 30s, probably, which is kind of interesting growing up in the church. But was there a moment for you where you really felt like that journey clicked?
There was a moment, and God had been poking and prodding my heart for a couple of years. I had lots of questions, so I wanted to kind of dig into my faith and figure out if I actually believed what I said I believed, because before my 20s, I never spent time in the Bible. And then my brother, I had a conversation with him, and he challenged me on some questions and to read a book that really opened up my eyes. And I remember the day I was in my bedroom. It was like, I was reading my Bible. I'd read this book by Ray Comfort that was called The Way of the Master, and the gospel clicked for me. And what I mean by that is that I always came from a place of being a really good person and being a good kid, doing good works. So I never truly understood my need for Jesus as a savior. And even though I accepted him into my heart as Lord and King, I still didn't really understand why I needed grace. He was just like, yes, I believe that you are Messiah, but like, I don't really need you to forgive you of my sin. I don't need you to forgive me of my sins because my sins aren't really that bad compared to other people.
Yeah.
And it was reading that book, The Way of the Master, that really opened up my eyes and showed me through the use of the 10 Commandments that I was a sinner in God's eyes. And
Yeah.
that was the moment. It was like, oh, I just like had the law put right in front of me like a mirror just shining back at my own face, and I finally saw like, oh, I'm a sinner by God's standard. And then I understood my need for a savior and for Jesus, and that's when it clicked, and I was like, I want to live in gratitude to you for the rest of my life, and I want to honor you and give glory to you out of that gratitude and thankfulness for because you died on the cross. You paid the penalty for my sin. I
Yeah.
had to figure out what my sin was first.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And it's funny because Ray Comfort, when you talk with him and when you read his works on that, I often don't think about the Ten Commandments in that way. That obviously I think of them as the rules and the regulations that they're moral law. They last forever. But that connection, hearing him explain that, has actually been really fruitful for me too in my walk and
Mhm.
realizing, oh wow, yeah, we are sinful. We do need Jesus, right? And I
Yeah.
love the way you describe that, though, is sort of feeling like my sins aren't that bad. And I think a lot of people feel that way. If I'm just a nice
Yeah.
person, it's enough, right? I don't need to do anything else. I don't need to believe anything else. And so that, I would imagine, that transformed the way you raise your kids, the way you
Mhm.
even make content, what you do in your career, everything you do, that decision to connect those things, has, I would imagine, transformed you.
Oh, it absolutely has. It gave me a whole different perspective on raising my kids, like you mentioned, deciding what schools they were going to go to, what we would teach them at home, and even the other, just people we would bring into our lives and that small sphere of influence. And then it certainly shaped me in my business and my career, and even that has grown in taken shape in different ways over the years since I've been back in the industry for about 15 years now, since I took that long extended break to raise my kids. And there's things, as you get older, they become more and more important to you, and that's my faith has always been with me. I've never left it at this doorstep. When I leave my house, it's always been with me, no matter what door I'm entering, no matter what space I'm entering. And yet I can look back at even 10 years ago, because still more baby steps within my Christian faith, to whereas now I just kind of lay it all on the table. It's the most important thing in my life.
Yeah, and I've probably done 100 interviews. I don't even know. You and I have done many interviews over the years, and it truly is who you are, and that is, and I can't emphasize that enough. I said it before. I want to say it again because it's one thing to be saying things, but to actually live it, um, and to actually just have that be who you are, that really says a lot for people who are watching. And I look at your career, and you obviously have done so much in front of the camera, but you're doing a lot now also behind the camera, producing.
Mhm.
You've done directing, even on Fuller House, Great American
Yep.
Family. You are an executive there as well, in addition to, again, being in front of the camera and making content. What is at the heart of that mission of all these things that you're doing, the growth that you've had on the entertainment front?
I mean, the mission for me in general, as the big, big, big picture, is to point people one step closer to Jesus. That's my mission. That's what I want to do. The ways in which I get to point people to Jesus are they look different depending on the day. Because I have so many facets to my companies and the content that I produce within my company. So for instance, I have a podcast, the Candace Cameron Bure podcast, and that is all things faith. So that's a way in which I get to point people. With Great American Family, of course, I'm an actress. You're going to see me in front of the screen on some television movies, but I also am producing those movies as well with my company. But even beyond that, like you mentioned, I'm an executive, the chief creative officer of the network and Great American Media in general, which then encompasses Great American Pureflix. So that for me is also pointing people one step closer to Jesus because of the content we curate and we produce and we house on our streaming platform and our network. And some of those are a little bit more faith forward. Some of them don't have faith content at all, but they're uplifting and they're positive, they are entertaining. But when you're surrounded by all of that, there's always places within it that are just going to keep pointing people to God, no matter where they are within their journey with God.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I mean, we know for a fact, you know this, I know this, there is such an industry out there. There's a thirst, rather, for content that is not just faith. Faith is huge, obviously, but also family friendly, things that are safe that you can just sit and watch
Yep.
with your family or put your kids in front of. It should be such a massive industry. And yet, it's interesting. It's just sort of growing now. And it's exciting
Mm-hmm.
for you, I would imagine, being at the center of helping move all of that forward. And I have to ask, obviously, we're going to get into a couple of your movies here in a moment, but Christmas, I know you love Christmas and some have called you the Queen of Christmas. I know you've pushed back on that in the past because you've said
Uh-huh.
Mariah Carey and others have it, but
Yeah.
what is it for you that just makes you love this season so much? I mean, you are the face of it in media. You truly
Mm-hmm.
are.
Well, thank you. I love I love the season because of all the feelings it brings out in people and the warmth and the generosity and within the decorations and the music and all of those things, the foods. Like it truly is a wonderful time of the year. But for me, the real reason I love it so much is that it is the easiest time to share Christ with everyone because that's what the season really is all about. And so, for people that may be hesitant or they get nervous to share their faith, it is a time of the season that welcomes it in the sense that you can ask your neighbor, "Hey, we're having our Christmas Eve church service. Would you like to come? There's a candle." Like nobody's going to be offended at that. They might say like, "No, thank you. We already have our plans," or, "Oh, we don't go to a church," whatever, but they're not going to be mad at you for asking. It's
Yeah.
what the season's all about. So I that is that's the easy answer, is that it's easy to share Christ with people during this time.
Yeah, that's actually a great response, and I think we often get so caught up sometimes. I know I do, in all the fun and the feelings, and we know what the purpose of it is, but we forget that everybody, I mean, virtually, it's 90+% of the country is celebrating this day, and the purpose of the day is Jesus. So, what better time to be sharing with others around
Yeah.
us? And you get a unique opportunity too. And let's talk about the first movie, My Christmas Hero, that you both produced and you star in. And this movie hits on November 24th on Great American Family. But you're often dealing with topics within these movies as well that are important subject matter. And this is, again, it's a Christmas film, but there's a little more there. So tell us a little bit about that film.
Yeah, I would love to. So, when you watch Great American Family movies, what I hope you take away is all the heart. That's what these movies are based on. They're based on family, they're based on love for love for family, love for country, and love for faith as well. And I think there's a warmth to our movies that sometimes get missed in the rom-com Christmas movie world. And this particular movie, My Christmas Hero, I it was so important to me to do a movie that in some way gave back to the military and put a spotlight on all the incredible and heroic work that they've done since the inception of our country, since it was all formed. So we have a little story. There's of course a little bit of a romance story, but this particular one was special to me because the character that I play, her grandfather served in World War II and died in World War II. So she goes on a little mission to find out what happened to him. And she meets some people along the way that are in the military. And it's so honoring to all of those people along the way, along with her grandfather, and then the current people in the services that she's working with. There's an incredible give back component, and the way in which there are wonderful organizations that help current military families that are dealing with PTSD and all of the stresses of that can come with being in the military. And my real grandfather served in World War II. So this was something that I connected with. And even when you do watch the movie, I hope that you do and enjoy it. But all of the things that we show in the movie, like there's a little box and she opens up a box and there's letters in it to his wife, and there's pictures of who would be my grandfather in the movie, but it's actually my grandfather because
Wow.
those were his military pictures. And my grandfather wrote letters to my grandmother every day that he was at war, and my grandmother saved all of them. So all of those were real and personal to me in the movie, and made it special. And I know it's honoring to my parents who have not yet seen the movie but can't wait. And it's a beautiful, heartwarming story.
I love that. You get everything. There's the romance there, but then there's also the deep sort of, history and your personal history there
Mhm.
too. That's really
Yeah.
cool. And I know you produced another project, A Christmas for the Ages. This one you're not in,
Mhm.
but you produced this, which must have been fun for a variety of reasons. I'll let you sort of explain, but tell us about that one.
Sure. I absolutely love this movie. And I know I can't really, tell you. I hope you watch both movies, but I would say if you're going to watch one, watch A Christmas for the Ages. I'm in love with this movie, and here's why. It's an incredible story about four generations of women. So it is a daughter, her mom, the grandmother, and a great grandmother. So, four generations, 20 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old, 80 years old. And they talk about what Christmas has been like through the decades when each of them were in their 20s, and how that looked in the 40s and in the 60s and in the 80s, 90s, and then current day. My daughter's Natasha Bure is starring in it along with Cheryl Ladd. You'll know her from Charlie's Angels and all the things. She's wonderful and plays the grandmother in it. And it's a beautiful story of connection. There's no drama point in terms of like it's the city girl that goes to the small hometown boy and they fall like this is a completely different movie that is truly all about family, all about the generational love that they have for one another, and recognizing the differences over time and what Christmas has meant to each of them, and how we honor all of those memories and still cherish them today.
That's incredible. That's amazing. And the fact that your daughter, it's got to be fun watching your daughter, continue to make projects and sort of follow in your footsteps in the acting world. That's got to be a beautiful thing to witness
Yeah.
for you.
It's wonderful for me. I think she gets tired of being compared to me and always, like following in mom's footsteps. However, she's a wonderful actress in her own right, and she does an incredible job. There's singing in this movie, there's performance in it, and Natasha is a beautiful singer. And so is Cheryl Ladd, by the way. So you'll love the end to this movie. It's really fun. But of course, as a mom, I'm so proud of Natasha.
Well, and there is plenty of reason to be, and our time is sort of coming to a close here. But I wanna also ask, because obviously we talked only about a couple of movies. People love Christmas movies, obviously, and this is the season for it. And so, Great American Family and Great American Pure Flix. What can you tell people? What's sort of your pitch to people to go over and check it out? Because you guys, I mean, the content slate is pretty impressive.
It is. We have wonderful people that are on our channel and more to come. But from Danica McKellar and Jill Wagner and Jen Lilly and Matthew Morrison and Chad Michael Murray, Cheryl Ladd, Natasha Bure, Dan Lissing. I mean, so many more. We have great talent on our channel. And as I mentioned before, the movies, they're really heartwarming. I mean, that's the core word to our films, and it touches the heart. So if you want to turn on and feel good and know that we will honor our country and we will honor our faith, those are all the elements that really set us apart. And the truth is, we need your viewership. We are a growing channel. We are only 3 years old. So we would love for you to spread the word and to actually turn on that channel and support if those values mean something to you. The only way that we can stay on and keep this channel growing is by your support to tune in and spread the word. So we appreciate that very much.
Well, Candace, we appreciate you and taking the time to share your journey and what you're doing at Great American Family. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much, Billy.
That brings us to the end of today's Higher Ground. We'll be back next week with another episode of the show. Stay tuned and head over to Higher Ground on Washington Times for all the news you need to read. We'll see you again next week.